A queue is really simple. It's basically just a waiting line. You get into a checkout line at the grocery store, and as the people ahead of you finish checking out, you move up in line. Let's make a new folder for the queue. Open it up. And for the queue, we are going to be using an array. So we need to make an object class that will hold the array. And let's open it up. First thing, let's make a variable and make it a string array. For enqueuing and dequeuing, we could just simply make two functions, but instead we are going to implement a Blueprint interface. Let's go into the content drawer, right click, come up to Blueprints, and right down here we have Blueprint interface. And let's have a look. An interface is read-only. This means that we won't be building the function here, we will only be naming it and deciding what inputs and outputs to give it. Let's make a function for enqueue, and let's give it an input, and let's add another function for dequeue. And I want dequeue to output some data that we can print to the screen. And this is all that we do in here. Let's go back to the queue object class. To implement the interface, we come over to Class Settings, and in the Details panel we have a section for interfaces. Select the Add drop-down, and let's search for the queue interface. After you select the interface, you'll see a new section appear that hold the functions that we made in the interface. Let's open them up. The enqueue function opens up into the event graph, and it has the data input that we will be using. And when we open up dequeue, it opens up into its own function graph. This is because we are outputting data into a return node. Because in the event graph, a return node is not available. Enqueuing data into the array is pretty straightforward. Get the array, search add, hook it up, and now when we enqueue data, it just adds it to the tail of the array. Dequeuing is also very straightforward. We are simply going to be removing data from index 0. But we also want to return the data from it, so let's set it into a local variable before we remove it. When we search to remove from the array, we have remove item and we have remove index. We just need to remove the item at index 0. And make sure you plug in the data to return it. And that's it for dequeue. I'm also going to create a function to print the array. Now let's go plug this into a widget class. This is the widget class for the linked list that we did in the last video. I'm just going to add the queue right next to it. Off of event construct, let's go ahead and use another construct object from class node. And let's change it to the queue array. Compile and save, and let's see what we have. Let's put some entries into the enqueue. here's what we have waiting in line. And when we dequeue, it should get rid of the A first. So we used an object class that holds an array that implements a queue. Now let's implement the queue on a linked list. In case if you missed it, go check out the video where we made a linked list. Let's open up the folder and let's open up our linked list. To implement the queue, let's go up to the class settings, go over to interfaces, and let's search for the same queue interface. And here we have the same enqueue and dequeue functions. And enqueuing is going to be very straightforward. We are just going to plug in the append function. And now when we enqueue into the linked list, it adds the data to the tail of the linked list. For dequeuing, I can't use my delete with value function, so we need to set up the dequeue function to delete the head node, and we also want to return the data from it. Let's first check if the head is valid. If it is not valid, we will simply return. If the head node is valid, then let's go ahead and set the data into a local variable. And then we need to see if the head is pointing to a next node. If head is not pointing to a next node, then we are going to simply set head to null. And we do that by using a setter and leaving this empty, and then return. And plug in the data. If head is pointing to a next node, then we need to set the head to heads next. And then return the data. And that's dequeue. And we don't need to make another function for printing because we had already made it in our linked list. Let's go back to the linked list widget and hook this thing up. Let's set up our linked list queue right next to our array queue. In the event graph, let's go ahead and construct another linked list. We have a linked list type named linked list, and we also have a linked list named queue, which is implementing the queue interface. And let's go run it.